So my story starts simple enough. We had just gotten back from San Antonio. We spent 5 days in San Antonio over Christmas. We get home, and Brianna Dean immediately calls the cops on me. Says she doesn't want me there. The female officer shows up, and Brianna Dean starts making false accusations, lies about me, what I've done, or what I'm about to do. And all the while, her twin sister, Brittany Dean, is saying, that's a lie, this is a lie.
Brianna, lying to the cops is not good. You're going to lose your bar license. Brianna, you can't lie to a cop just because.
My father's on the phone and he's...
After about maybe 30 minutes of that, the police officer, she takes me and Brittany outside and warns us that Brianna Dean is making false accusations. You may want to protect yourself.
But, she's making accusations, so it's something that you have to decide, is it a good idea for you to be here? Because then she's going to make maybe a false report or some other solution.
Immediately after that, Brittany chimes in and says, something goes really deep with her.
Something goes really, really deep.
Don't know the resolution.
I wanted to believe that Brittany was not like Brianna Dean or William Dean. I wanted to believe that Brittany was somehow better or different. She had just got, done sticking up to me, or sticking up for me to the police officer, letting the police officer know that her twin sister, mind you, is making false accusations. So with that in the back of my head, I figured, okay, Brittany's probably not like these people. But as the relationship progressed, we hit 1 year and 1.5 years, I realized that she's exactly like these people. There's no difference. This is just a family of rotten human beings. But I persisted, hoping that I was wrong, hoping that Brittany was a good person deep down. Still, I recorded every conversation I ever had with Brittany, every time we were face-to-face with each other, any sort of social post. She was really controlling when it came to what I was allowed to eat, what I was allowed to drink, what I was allowed to say about politics, what I was allowed to post on social media. So I just kind of kept a running record of all of this stuff. After about 1.5 years of the abuse from her twin sister, and her father, I had enough. So we both called the relationship off. And I remember getting a phone call 3 weeks before Brittany is in front of a magistrate, lying to a magistrate to get an ex parte protective order. Brittany calls me up 3 weeks before and is in tears to me, first of all, saying, I'm really sorry for what my family has done to you. They owe you a huge apology. I will never forgive them for what they've done, but I did stick up for you.
I'm terribly sorry how my family treated you. They owe you a huge apology, but I did stick up for you. I told them I still believe them to be dead wrong, and I'll never forgive them for it.
I actually did believe her. I believe that she believes that what her twin sister and what her father are doing and were doing are bad. And I also believe that she was sticking up for me as best as she could. But in all honesty, they're a Mormon family, so if you step out of that circle of trust, they're going to eat you alive. And I don't blame Brittany for not wanting to stand up against them, seeing as how they react to people who speak out against them. My assumption is that Brittany Dean is possibly being manipulated by them, but is also really scared of what they might do or say if she doesn't go with the flow. So after 1 year of the abuse, I released the recording with the police officer, and I released a threat that William Dean had left on my cell phone voicemail. And within a couple hours, they were at the magistrate's office filing for an ex parte restraining order for a man in Colorado. Ex parte basically means that I'm not there, but a proceeding happened and a judgment in their favor is listed. So essentially, an ex parte hearing is a hearing where you are not legally allowed to represent yourself. I was not allowed to represent myself or provide additional facts that may sway the judge to say, there is no immediate threat of danger. And in fact, the Virginia law for restraining orders and protective orders states that there has to be an immediate fear or threat of fear, physical or sexual danger. You're not supposed to get a protective order just because. You have to be able to prove that that person that you need protection from has been violent towards you, or is planning on being violent towards you, and has made threats to be violent towards you. None of that existed. So of course I couldn't go to the ex parte hearing and argue my side. They got the protective order, and then they immediately moved to charges. It was within a couple of hours after I'd stood up against my abusers that they not only had the protective order, but that they were lodging charges. And ever since then, every time I win against them in court, it's a brand new set of charges. And for every one charge, I get charged twice. So every time there's one violation, it counts as 2 violations in the Amherst Court District. At the preliminary hearing, I was not allowed due process. I was not allowed to present my case. I was not allowed to object to obvious lies that I had proof to. The Dean twins filed this protective order because of the recordings that went out. But as you can probably guess, the judge would not even listen to the recordings. He wouldn't even take that into consideration, even though they were good enough to issue an ex parte protective order against an individual, taking away, mind you, some of his constitutional rights and currently violating, in the act of violating his due process. Ever since then, I've been fighting them in court, giving interviews with news groups, investigative journalists, Sweetbriar board members, alumni, friends, enemies of the Dean twins, really anyone that wants to hear the story. I will tell the story too. It's important for me as a victim of domestic abuse, but also as a victim of malicious prosecution under a protective order. It's important for me to stand up and speak as loudly as I can about what's actually happening, because it needs to change. I can't go get victim help or funds or counseling. It puts men in these positions where you are guilty just because you are a male. And the Dean family, being a family of lawyers, they know this. They know how to abuse this, and they're doing a really good job at abusing it, to be quite honest. No one really wants to think about the actual victim here. Now, are there actual female victims who need that? Yes, of course there are. But there are also male victims that need that. And this should be offered to males as well. And when it seems like there is a malicious prosecution or people abusing protective orders, something needs to happen. More often than not, these people are not going to be prosecuted. I mean, there's plenty of laws that you can prosecute them on. But more often than not, because they're a woman, they're not going to be prosecuted. And it puts men in this really dangerous position. You either do as the woman says, or if she is smooth enough, I guess, she'll just bring the law down on you to make you do what she says. And in that scenario, there doesn't have to be violence. Just like in my scenario, there was no violence. There is no violence. There is no threat of violence. But because I stood up and said, enough is enough with my abusers, this is what I've been going through, they went and used an easily abused law against me, knowing that they could get away with it, knowing how to abuse it.